$82.5 million out of a $208 million settlement. And John, I'll say this since I don't care about politics. The whole thing is a sham. It's lawyers grabbing money, period, the end. It's literally a joke. If you do the math on it, the plaintiffs were going to get like $15 each.
That's if they're lucky.
I'm sorry. Can I say one other thing while we're talking about it? I love the New York Times because I know y'all are watching, and the Wall Street Journal, to write an article on that for once. Because instead of continuing to trash our industry without doing actual reporting, why don't you focus on the lawyers? Because that's I want to know what the lawyers told the plaintiffs they would get out of it, and then interview some plaintiffs to see what their expectation was versus reality. I'll get off my soapbox. Sorry, John, continue.
No, but yeah, I believe that you're absolutely correct.
On this episode of Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered, we talked about change in the industry. We talked about when Merrill Lynch, Sears, and Prudential were trying to get into the space and the industry lost its mind. There's parallels to that with Zillow and new companies coming into the space. Going to be an incredible show. Tune in. You talk about it privately. We talk about it publicly. This is the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. Welcome again to the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. I'm your host, James Twiggins, along with my co-host, Crazy Uncle Keith.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Robinson, tell us about our special guest, John Featherston, the CEO of RISMedia.
It was awesome. John's been in the business since 1977. I was 6, y'all. 6. James was like minus whatever. And
that was not a thought.
To have someone with that much depth and understanding about the industry was great. He gave us the origin story of RISMedia's name, which I had never heard. We talked about what really matters in residential real estate. Of course, we got his thoughts on NAR. And then we get to hear James lose his mess about the trial lawyers. You want to check this one out, kids. It's fun.
And just to throw it in there, we talked about Prudential, Merrill Lynch, and Sears when they were trying to get into the real estate business as an example of like when everybody's freaking out about change. It's a great show. Everybody tune in on this one.
Sears, get a hammer, get a house. Sears.
John, welcome to the show. We are super excited to have you. We haven't had many guests on our show with the depth of knowledge of this industry as you. And we are excited to go deep on some questions. Certainly, it's been a very non-traumatic time in residential real estate. There's nothing to talk about.
Nothing new.
Nothing new in the news. And I know you've been in this for a while, and so we want to get your take on all of that. And thanks for taking time out to be here, my friend. We do greatly appreciate it. So,
Absolutely.
We're going to start with just give the viewers and listeners your background, your current role, your career path getting here, and then we'll dive deep into some rapid fire questions and other stuff. So we'll start there, my friend.
Okay. Well, listen, James and Keith, it's really an honor and a privilege to be invited to be on your show. And I hope hope this proves to be worthwhile and fun. I started in this industry in 1977, and how I started in this industry was a gentleman by the name of Jim Keene, wonderful guy, gave me an opportunity, and that opportunity was to come work for him. He was executive vice president of PHH Home Equity, or corporate relocation company. And I was a recent college graduate, and really wet behind the ear. I had played in a basketball game against Jim Keene and the PHH Home Equity industrial team. And I had a lot of points because these guys were old guys, and I was a young Turk. So I scored a lot of points, and after the game, Jim pulled me aside and said, "Hey, great game, young guy. Tell me about yourself." And I said, "Well, I just graduated from college." And he said, "Did you play basketball in college?" I said, "Yeah, I played a little bit." And I told him where, and he said, "Wow." And then he said, "What are you looking to do?" And I said, I'm just looking for a job. Okay. I wasn't looking for a career. I had no idea what a career really meant at that time. And he said, well, do you have a suit? And I said, yeah, of course I've got a suit. My mother had bought me a suit for graduation. He said, why don't you come in tomorrow morning to the executive offices of PHH Home Equity, come up to the executive floor, bring your suit, and let's sit down and talk. And I said, yeah, that sounds great. And I went back, told my parents, hey, I think I've got an interview for a job. So the next morning, I showed up at PHH Home Equity on the executive floor, went through the receptionist and then his private secretary, went into his office, and I had a suit on a hanger with me. He looked at me and said, what the hell is that? And I said, well, that's my suit. You asked me if I had a suit. Well, long story short, he sent me down to the human resources, actually personnel manager. I'll never forget his name, Jack Dieter. And he said, told Jack, hire him for our management training program. There are going to be 13 individuals for this management training program, but they all had to have an MBA. I didn't have an MBA. I could barely spell MBA. And
but you had a suit.
So I went
you
down
had a suit.
Yeah.
I had a
And
suit,
you dropped
and
and you dropped 40 on him in a pickup game. So
well, yeah, I had good game. But the long story short is he was forced to hire me because Jim Keene said hire him. And I looked at this fella and I said, Jack, by the way, do you have a couple more applications? And he said, why? He said, well, I've got a couple of friends that I think would fit into our organization quite well. And he looked at me and said, are they friends of Mr. Keene? I said, yeah, they're better friends of Mr. Keene than I am. And so the truth of the matter is both of those fellas, I got them an application, and they both stayed with the company for more than 35 years.
wow.
Okay.
Wow.
I only lasted 2 years and then started my career. So anyway, that's how I started. And within what I did was my job was to go around and work in the residential real estate field, help create networks of real estate brokers in the territories they had me working, because this was all pre-computers. And they needed to know what real estate brokers in what marketplaces could handle their corporate relocation. And after 2 years of doing that for them and 1 year for someone else, I thought, wow, I could start a company that created all this data about what real estate brokers, appraisers, agents, corporate relocation people could use so they could go directly to the real estate market. And that's how I started RISMedia, which stands for the Relocation Information Services Inc.
I don't think
RIS Inc.
anybody actually knew that, by the way.
I didn't
I've
either.
never asked you that the entire time I've known you, and now I just learned what that stood for. And it's 44 years ago? Is that?
Well, 44, yeah, 45. I've been in the industry 47 years, and some of the brokerage relationships, agent relationships that I created my first year in 1977 lasted all the way till today. So it's been a long, great, wonderful ride.
We'll dive into a background on RISMedia in a bit. I want to go. Keith and I love these rapid fire questions just to let everybody know our guests. So Keith, why don't you start us out a little bit on this?
Sure. Since you gave us the origin story of the company name, we'll ask a superhero question. If you were a superhero, who would it be? Who would you pick and why?
Well, that's a good question, Keith. You know what? I'm not a big superhero type of person, but I would think, because I'm in the media business, I would choose Superman because
he was a reporter during the day.
He was a reporter at the Daily Planet,
right.
But also one of the things that I admire about the character is he did good deeds, but he did them remaining anonymous. Okay.
Yeah.
And he was also, it appeared to be, at least with his cub reporter friend and his girlfriend reporter friend, he was a good fellow
He was.
employee.
Yeah,
that is true.
Today he'd have an Instagram account and 2 billion followers, and it'd be a hot,
Yeah,
it'd be a
that's
hot mess. But
And
the
by the way,
OG
Keith-
Superman, yeah.
Keith is thinking right now about a pod we did where I explained to him that I dressed up as Superman as a Halloween costume, and you have to do that visual for a second for me being very tall and slender as Superman.
Why-
Nobody got
why are
it.
you
A few people got
why
the
are you-
joke, but just
Why?
want to throw that out there. So
Why are you resetting that?
I could see you being dressed up
I mean-
as Superman, James. You got the the body
totally,
and
and
all the
very
rest.
people were like, "I don't get it." I'm like, "It's supposed to be a joke, people." All right, let's move to the last couple on these. Favorite book or podcast that favorite book you're reading or have read recently, or podcast that you've listened to.
That's another good question. I being in this the publishing and the media business, I get exposed to a lot of great books. But one that I would probably recommend right now is "Row the Boat" by P.J. Fleck. It's a wonderful book about rowing and how crew is an exercise and a sport that takes a lot of teamwork. It's a never give up attitude, and the approach to life, family, and business in his book is absolutely awe-inspiring. So I would say
Interesting.
row the boat. Row
Interesting.
the boat.
That's a good one. All
Okay.
right, I'll order it today.
Keith,
Last one. Oh yeah.
And then you said
Either
said
or.
podcast,
or you can
okay?
do both.
Or both.
Okay, well, you know what? First of all, I've been very interested in your work, and I've looked at many of the podcasts that you have done, and I think our dear friend, mutual friend, Jessica Egerton, who you've had on, Victor Lung, great guy. Art Carter, Dan Duffy, my God, Dan Duffy
Yeah.
and his brother, they should be. They're just. They should be on the real estate version of Mount Rushmore.
They're a good group
So,
of people. We love Dan. That was one of Keith's favorites because Dan's like
Yeah.
super numbers nerdy, and so is Keith. And
Yeah.
that was the first time Keith ever met Dan Duffy and was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
God, he's amazing." I'm like, "I know. You should party with him too. He's a great guy." So
and he's a great party. And you know what? A couple other quick ones are the Buffini brothers. They do a great job. And anything that Gino Blafari does, absolutely, tremendous. Emergent, and Gary Keller is a very interesting guy to hear on podcast, as is the latest version, really, of Dave Lineker and what he does. And then emerging stars like Anthony Lamacchia.
Sure.
And, he's a controversial rising star in the
is.
brokerage world.
Yeah,
But it's a lot
he
of
is.
it.
He
Yeah,
is.
it's a lot.
All right, Keith. We'll get this
All right,
last one.
one. Then we'll dive in on some industry stuff. If you could have lunch with one person, current or historical, who would it be and why?
Oh, well, once again, I'm not a guy with 10-second answers, but obviously for me, my father, who lived, he died way too young, but he lived a very fascinating and interesting life through the Depression. Landed at D-Day +4, fought through the entire war as an infantryman, then fought again in Korea. And then he raised a family of 6 children, and a real terrific family man, and he built a business that is still running today. So I would want him, but then I would want to have my dad and I, one of our favorite characters of all time is Thomas Edison. And I'd love to have a lunch with Thomas Edison to ask him about his feelings towards what he created and how it transformed
The world.
humanity.
Yeah.
And then ask him, what would he do in today's world?
We were having
Yeah,
those
that'd be
conversations about how every generation always is like, your generation did this, and we were going deep on that. So it'd be interesting to have those discussions. Well, so all right, let's dive into some main talking points, because one of the things that we're really excited to hear from you about, you've been in the industry for 47 years, as you mentioned, and then 44 with RISMedia. Obviously you guys cover the news, so you cover and see everything. I would love for you to kind of dive into a few things here. since we've got you. Number one is some of like the proudest moments you've seen either in your career or the industry over that period of time. That'll be the first question. And then a follow-up is going to be, we want you to tell us some crazy stuff that you've seen as well. Yeah. Like the stuff that, we've forgotten about because everybody's 24-hour news cycle, but there's just so much drama. We want to start with like some really interesting things that have occurred and then also some stuff that has happened. And with like the idea of, I've heard a lot of people say that we've been here before. So,
and we have been here before. Okay. However, I think we'd all be remiss not to realize that we're all just renting on this planet. Okay. Our lives here are relatively short. Okay. And I've been very fortunate, 47 years in the same career. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't full of excitement and changes and innovation. I would also tell you, I would not be sitting at RISMedia if it wasn't for Apple Computer. We were one of the first adapters of the desktop publishing systems that Apple came out with, Aldous PageMaker, etc. That enabled me and our company to actually compete in the publishing world. We were able to do things with a staff a third of the size of traditional publishers. So if it wasn't for adapting innovation back in the 80s of Apple, we wouldn't be here. But then again, our entire industry, which I find fascinating, has consistently been adapting to challenges that have come over the hill, to competitors that have come over the hill. One of the first stories we were covering in my early days, the advent of Sears and Allstate, Allstate, Merrill Lynch, Prudential, all coming into the industry. And I can remember going around this country and going and speaking at events and having people stand up and actually make comments like, "Oh, if you don't get with Prudential or Allstate or
Sears
or Merrill Lynch, you're doomed. You're doomed. You're not going to be able to compete." And I used to stand up and say, "No, that's not true." Okay, there's a place at the table for all of those and others organizations. However, for the independent or a franchise, broker and or agent, there's a lot of opportunity. Don't be, the naysayers are everywhere. So in my many years in the industry, there's constantly been competitors coming over the hill. I'll never forget, one came from England, and they had a treasure trove of millions and millions of dollars of investment seed capital and marketing capital, and they were a discount operation. I won't mention them by name, Foxtons, but I won't mention.
I was going to say it because I knew who you were talking about. Yeah.
But I won't mention them by name because they still own garages and whatever. They were going to transform. I met with their executives. They were going to transform our industry, and if you weren't part of the, of their system, you were not going to be part of the future. Well, that wasn't true. Okay. Then there was, some discounters constantly coming in and et cetera. But what's a discount?
It's subjective.
Okay. It's subjective. Yeah. But then probably one of the most interesting times, I believe, in my career was 1994-95. My company had started a listing service that we thought would be really innovative. It was called HomeWeb. We had partnered with some folks to create HomeWeb. And the Wall Street Journal did a full-page article on where home buyers should shop on the World Wide Web for homes. And they talked about 4 different sites. One was our site. It's a full page, 1996, okay? And one of them was RIN, by the way, which became Home Store, which became, Move, etc. So the World Wide Web, which was the internet, 95, 94, 95, 96, was such an incredible boom to our industry. Yet, just like today with AI, people were unsure how to harness this.
Well,
to
they're
their
freaking
benefit
because listings were being put online.
Then
Yeah,
Right.
Absolutely. So you had that there. They were freaking out, and it's exactly what they were doing. When I think back to things, key moments in my career that you saw opportunities and challenges, the internet was another great opportunity and challenge. The housing collapse of 2008 and 9. Okay. Boy, I'll tell you what, if there ever was an opportunity for someone to run around and say, Chicken Little, the sky is falling. Well, it was falling for many. Okay. However, our industry, and James, you personify this. Our industry is an industry that's built on opportunity. Okay. And it's built on providing opportunities to those and educating them as to how to take advantage of opportunities and be a conduit of success for their buyers or sellers or clients that they're serving. Okay. And in those times, those distressed properties, times of 2008 or 9, it was the cream of the crop rose to the top. Okay.
And they had relationships with banks, and it was a different type of prospecting at that time.
Sure.
And Keith and I met, by the way, John, over cocktails. Keith was running. God, Keith, you were at Mason
Large,
McDuffie.
Yep.
And I was running Realty World at the time, and we met over cocktails because everybody in the room, John, you'll laugh at this. We were at a big broker meeting. All the brokers in the room were like, "Things are great. We're doing well." And Keith and I are looking at each other like,
tough, but we're
"You're
fine."
all full of shit. Like, our bottom line is awful. And we're going to go to the bar and get drunk because it is like mayhem in residential real estate. John, I want to ask you a question real quick because I think you mentioned something which was interesting. I remember I've also been in the business a long time. My family's third generation. I remember doing a PowerPoint a long time ago about, you said coming over the hill. Just words that we've heard multiple times from, the lion. It was the lion over the hill, I think, is the term that the media picked up on.
Yes.
But you mentioned something that I'll bet you most people who listen to this have no idea what I'm about to say, and you can reinforce this. But you mentioned Merrill Lynch, Sears, Prudential, all of which were coming into residential real estate, all of which no longer exist in residential real estate. And
some of which no longer exist at
all.
Sears.
Sears.
Yeah.
And to be clear, I have a photo that I put in a PowerPoint deck when Sears had a section in their department store where the agents would be there to sell real estate. And just for context, like when you mention that, it's a really great reminder that this industry is always changing and there's always players coming in, and most of them don't make it. There's lots of interesting ideas and everyone freaks out, but we talk about the industry changing. I don't know. Tell me if I'm off, John, but in some ways,
right.
it changed. It's always adapting, but it's still fairly similar to how it's been the past, at least in the way that we work with an agent, transact, etc.
Well, what matters, similar. Right? The important parts have not changed. I'll let John answer, but like that core point.
No, you're both, in my humble opinion, James and Keith, you're both right. Now, when you think back to the Sears thing, well, the Sears was a wonderful integrated strategy. That was you had Allstate, which was insurance, and you had Sears and Roebuck, that at the time was the largest operator of malls throughout the United States. Where did everyone shop? They went to malls. You go where, it's what did James Dillinger or one of the bank robbers say?
Why do I
rob banks? Because that's where the money is, okay? And if you're operating malls where literally millions of people are going to shop, well, it makes perfect sense to be selling them homeowners insurance, boat insurance, car
insurance. Which is literally what everyone's still trying to do today, is an integrated service offering.
Yeah, exactly. But they don't. There's no
Right.
more malls, so there's very few, I should say. And that was Bill Chi, by the way, the president of NAR in the late 1990s, that said the lion over the hill. I believe he said that in the convention out in Hawaii, where I was. As a matter of fact, not only was I there, we had a booth in the exhibit hall that really was a garage. Okay. It was a multi-level garage. This shows you how different conventions were even back then.
Yeah.
Back then, but you had the people were afraid of change. Okay, and back up a second. When I entered the industry, there were about 130 or so, 140 national real estate franchises. Okay, and they were small. Most of them were small. But when Dave Liniger started in 1973, there were hundreds more. So we find our equilibrium. Okay, and today, when you look at the national players, there's a whole breed of what I think to be wonderful offerings that Next Home, the organization you fellows are involved. What a tremendous organization, and it provides opportunity, newfound opportunity. You look at the Realty One Group, another fascinating culture, HomeSmart. I could go on and on. There's several of them that are just opportunities, but they weren't here that long ago. Okay? And they're fitting a wonderful niche. The organizations that are the survivors, the thrivers from the early years of RISMedia, guys like Gary Keller's, Keller Williams, Dave Liniger's Remax, let alone all the Anywhere brands that continue to play a significant role, and of course Berkshire Hathaway, which really was had its roots from Prudential and Merrill Lynch. But we've got a wonderful, strong industry, and one of the things that I think you wanted to talk about was change. Is we're constantly changing. Real estate changes all the time. Our industry changes and evolves all the time.
The one thing, though, John, in just listening and thinking about what you've said, the through line that I think carries through, and the reason some of these, Sears failed, well, there's a lot of reasons Sears failed, but the through line then and now, through all the change and the different models and companies coming in and companies going out, is I think the companies that have survived really understand the deeply intimate relationship between their real estate professional and the human being who wants to buy and sell houses. And while I can see the boardroom at Sears, right? Like, this is so great. We have this, we have 8,000 people a day walking past this fake office that we're going to set up inside of Sears, and with that much foot traffic, it'll translate to X number of leads, which will lead to Y number of transactions, blah, 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 right? But the companies that lose sight of that deeply intimate relationship are the ones who fail. And the companies who never lose sight of that, in my opinion, and I'd love your thoughts, are the ones that succeed. Do you see that through line?
Keith, I think you're absolutely right. Now, the seat the view you have depends upon where you sit, right?
Always.
And it always is. However, I have no idea why or how this happened to me throughout my career. But I have been one of the most fortunate individuals, really tremendously blessed in our industry. I have sat in boardrooms, interacted with the chairman and CEOs and boards of virtually every single major corporation that's been involved in our industry. But with that, there's a responsibility with that. So some stories I won't share, but I will tell you that you're spot on, Keith. Those that keep their ear to the market, that understand what the true asset is that they've acquired, and realize that the real estate professional who has the relationship with their neighbors, their friends, their relatives, they are the eyes and ears, and they are the conduits to transactions. They succeed, okay? But those that are constantly, and I've seen this happen many times, those that are just interested in inflating their pocketbooks and adding layers of nebulous services to sell to the agents and or broker owners, or they looking to become technologists rather than real estate organizations, and layering on those costs to their agents and brokers, they tend to fail, and they tend to fail miserably because they lose the confidence and the purpose that the broker owner and the agent have invested into those organizations. Those people are hardworking local businessmen and women, and they're looking for help to be relevant, to add value, to increase value to their customers. Okay, and you know what? They don't want to be taken advantage of. They don't move a lot, but I'll tell you what, they don't move from brand to brand a lot. But when they do, that migration, you can't stop.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because if you think about it, and again, I'm not going to name names just because it's appropriate in this context, but the companies that don't have boots on the ground, people that are interacting belly to belly with their customer and community, are the ones who, and you've referenced a few, fail because they don't understand the relationship between the agent and the consumer. They don't understand that it's a very infrequent transaction. I'm not going to Amazon my house. I just don't think that's ever going to happen. And the companies that have tried to do this, there are still many that are still trying in this industry, where it's more of a tech focus. It doesn't mean they don't get some transactions. It doesn't mean they don't get some business from there, but they're still smaller players. And the ones who have really just kind of managed that relationship. We had Errol on our show and did a podcast from Zillow, and I love Errol. He's so smart. He's so smart.
Errol is
brilliant.
Spectacular.
Brilliant.
First of all, he's a great guy, period. And Zillow is fortunate to have him.
100%. Okay? He made this comment that was really interesting, because he was basically emphasizing that they can't do their business without agents. Now, we can all debate their cost model and all of those things, but he made it very clear multiple times. Our business only works when we have agents who are, for lack of a better word, working with Zillow to create the relationships with the humans. And don't I'm not going to put words in his mouth. He didn't say this, but we all know they've sat in a boardroom and tried to figure out how to increase costs and reduce overhead and look at, do we need agents or not? And they've come to that conclusion that we have to have them in part of this process, because the consumer doesn't want to just do everything online. They want somebody to help them through that experience.
Well, not only that,
well, James, when you talk about that, and Zillow is just an example. They have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. Okay, and if they'd be remiss if they just sat back and ran the company the way they ran it 5 years ago. They took a multi-billion-dollar hit, or $2 billion hit, getting involved with trying to become a buyer,
iBuyer,
iBuyer, etc.
Good times. Good
but
times.
nothing ventured, nothing gained. But I would suggest that on the portal side of this equation, you had you have three players on the portal side. Okay, three legitimately strong players. But I'm not a betting man, and we do business with all of these organizations. But I would tell you that Zillow has a long-standing relationship with thousands of agents that many of them swear by what Zillow's model is, even though it's a referral fee. It's a very hefty referral fee. But you look at their number one competitor, CoStar, and look at the innovation that they're bringing to the table. And you know what? Innovation heightens competition, and it adds value to those that embrace it. And I'm looking at what they're doing and saying, whoa, this is really a transformational moment on the portal side of our business. Okay.
A lot of money.
The third player, Realtor.com is trying to play in that as well. But, let me back up for a moment, because it's not, you talk about change and you talk about where we're headed as an industry. The MLSs, which are an incredibly important part of our industry, and after being involved with this for a long, long time, I've never seen such talent as the following folks. And you've had several of them on your podcast, and I've had many of them, and they come to our event. The shameless plug here, but our 37th annual CEO and Leadership Exchange in Washington, D.C. James is always there. Absolutely. And you're an integral part of that, and bringing your but these individuals that run brokerage firms, that run brands, that are top producing agents, getting together to talk about an exchange of ideas, systems that work, systems that don't work. But I'm about to mention a couple of them because they're absolutely fabulous. Art Carter. You had Art Carter on your podcast. Talk about an innovator. And Brian Donnellan and Mary Jo Cohen. My God, my old buddy Richard Haggerty. These are guys that are really changing the world. Jim Milan from Rocky Mountain, and Deanna Hall and Rebecca Jensen. These, I've never seen such, and there's more, a lot more on the MLS side of real smart, innovative executives that are helping to lead the MLSs for the benefit of their members. God, you go back 15 or 20 years, and that sector of our industry was not run by the type of superstars that we have right now. And you know what? Think about how crazy that is. It was only in my short history, my God, we used to wait every 2 weeks to get the MLS book, which looked like, which was killing more trees than we could possibly afford to kill, and then big bold print across the front: "Don't share with anyone."
We've changed in time. Keith, why don't you take us into some NAR discussion real quick?
So you mentioned the MLSs, and obviously they're tied to NAR in some ways, and James and I have been pretty vocal about, we got to be honest, and NAR's had a rough 24 months, and that doesn't mean you should throw.
Gee, I must have missed it.
Yeah. I'm sure you haven't heard anything about it. And I just really, as someone with the long range view that you have had, what are your thoughts on NAR today? What if you ran NAR, and I know you don't, what would you be doing? How would you be advising that they approach the next 12 months with the last 24 months that they've had?
That's a good question.
Well, Keith, that's really quite a question, and to pose some thought to. First of all, I wouldn't be looking out any further than 12 months if I was running NAR. There's some immediate changes. I know they, with Sears as the president, you got a great guy who's literally going to get things done. Okay, that's number one. Okay, and he's a broker. Okay, and he gets it. Change had to happen. There was too much going on internally that was causing NAR to be really in jeopardy, because not only do you have the internal problems that they were facing, but you had the external problems, the 23 plus lawsuits that they're named in right now. Now, leadership of NAR, not beholding, would not have did not cause these lawsuits to come on board, to become prevalent. Okay. However, leading us out of what these lawsuits could potentially do to the business, I think will will be the greatest challenge that NAR will face.
Have you ever seen anything like this before in your history of this kind of challenge with NAR and people questioning its purpose and just really going at them? Have you seen this before in your 47 years?
Yeah, well, to some degree, but never, nothing along this level. There was in the mid '90s, there was a movement amongst many brokers, large brokers. Now we do our Power Broker report. We have been reporting on the largest 500, 1,000 brokers in this industry, transactions, dollar volumes, office productivity, et cetera, longer than anyone, okay, since the early 1980s, okay, or mid 1980s. So with that, the relationships with these brokers have been, talking about all different issues. There was a lot of brokers that really were interested in breaking away from NAR in the mid 90s.
What was the reason?
And I had, they didn't think that the National Association was serving their needs as a large brokerage organization, and there's many that still feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does, but it was the resources weren't there, the technology wasn't there, but also in today's world, I was against it then, breaking away. Sure. I'm against it now because I think NAR serves a great purpose. Okay, lobbying for home ownership. The way we conduct our industry and how we do it for the consumer, NAR has been an integral part in making sure that everything was done above board and ethically. I don't believe that these lawsuits, by the way, were fundamentally sound whatsoever. Okay, now my organization was, I think, one of the first to report on how much money the attorneys are getting out of the first Trump.
$82.5 million out of a $208 million settlement. And John, I'll say this since I don't care about politics. The whole thing is a sham. It's lawyers grabbing money, period, the end. It's literally a joke. If you do the math on it, the plaintiffs were going to get like $15 each.
Yeah, and that's if they're lucky. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge we've never faced.
I'm sorry. Can I say one thing while we're talking about it? I love the New York Times because I know y'all are watching, and the Wall Street Journal, to write an article on that for once. Because instead of continuing to trash our industry without doing actual reporting, why don't you focus on the lawyers? Because that's I want to know what the lawyers told the plaintiffs they would get out of it, and then interview some plaintiffs to see what their expectation was versus reality. I'll get off my soapbox. Sorry, John, continue.
No, but I believe that you're absolutely correct. Now, being a journalist for our industry, a trade journalist, I was appalled at some of the terms that were being used by the mainstream media in describing our industry as a cabal, as this or that. Yes, absolutely. And you know what? Yeah. It shows a glaring lack of knowledge as to who comprises our industry and what they actually do for a living. Now, I will tell you that I believe one of the things that all of us, NAR, every broker, every agent team leader, every agent, every board should do is we need to make sure that we do a much better job starting whatever time it is now, but the next minute in defining what we do, so it's totally transparent, and it shows what the services, the skills we bring to bear, and so every buyer that utilizes any one of our realtor friends, they understand. This is what I'm going to be delivering for you, and this is how much I'm charging.
We should have been doing it all along.
Yeah,
absolutely. But you can. Things are going so rosy for a long time, and there was no immediate need. Now, in 1988, 89, I've got to tell you, 1988, 89, in St. Louis, Missouri, I sat with three individuals, four actually. Gail Liniger, Dave Liniger's wife, lovely gal. God bless her. She's still doing well. And Charlie Dahlheimer, who's still in St. Louis. Tom Dooley, God rest his soul. They were the people that really took REBAC, Real Estate Buyers Agent Council, from about 110 people, members, and built that organization because we all realized buyer agents, we have to define buyer agency, and we have to make sure that we're protecting ourselves in the industry in the future. And if it wasn't for the foresight of those individuals, this type of calamity probably would have been faced many years ago. So anyway.
Yeah.
Keith, why don't you, just for time's sake, we got one question we always ask every guest. Keith, take us home. So.
And I can't wait for this answer because with your experience, understanding, just the intuitive nature that you have about this industry, if you were an agent or a broker, what is the one thing you would implement today to help your business in 2024?
Well, that, first of all, great closing question. I would think, and I'm not an expert at this, but I would think the one thing I would, other than the buyer agency, challenge, is AI, artificial intelligence, and adapting that into, if you're an agent or an agent team leader or a broker, big, small, or medium, I'd be integrating that and getting to know the capabilities. Don't spend lots of money, but I'd be understanding the capabilities and chat GTP and figure out how that can help you now. Okay. Yeah. I just sat, I was in I go to many of these conferences and all over the country, and I'm very fortunate to be invited as a guest. I sat through, most recently yesterday, or day before yesterday, I was in New Orleans. I'm in Connecticut, by the way, right now. I was in New Orleans, and I listened to Christy Butnick, the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, talk about what they're doing as far as AI and their recommendations of what to do. The recommendations, it's not like they said, hey, buy this service. No, do the following. Get involved, okay? And I think if I was an agent, if I was a broker, small, bit, or medium, or large, or an agent team leader, I would be figuring out how to utilize this and give me a competitive advantage in the market.
You know what I love about that answer, John, is so many people in the media, which is the industry, specific, that's the industry that you've built your company and your livelihood in, have leaned away from or tried to castigate AI, Chat GPT, and you're leaning into it is a beautiful example of how open-minded and thoughtful you are in your approach to building your business over the years, because a lot of people in media are afraid of AI and what it could be, and you're agnostic. This is a technology. It's coming either way. The train's coming, so you're going to get run over by it, or you're going to jump on it, and you're saying jump on it, which is beautiful.
Thanks, Keith. You're going into baseball season, and it's kind of like the guy or gal who is a hitter and is told you can't hit the curb, and you step up to the plate, and if you're ill-equipped and you can't hit the curb, you're probably going to strike out. They're going to throw you curves. So what do? You better embrace that and work a little extra to figure out how to hit the curve. Okay. Yeah. And you know what? Otherwise, baseball isn't your sport. Okay. Yeah. And in real estate, it's very simple. Okay. Everyone is interested in what AI could potentially be. Your neighbors want to know. They don't know. Yeah. They want to know. So the little bit of additional information you have makes you seem to be an even more cognizant and capable professional, someone they should be using.
Yeah.
I'm gonna wrap it up with this quote because you just reminded me of it. It's Clint Eastwood, and it's when he says, "That's called trouble with the curve, jackass." Do you remember the scene in the movie?
Oh, I did.
So I think that's a good way to end it because I love just Clint Eastwood showing him that stuff, and it just reminded me of everything here. So John, thanks so much for being here today. It was really great to have you and hear some of the stories. I always learn something new when I hear you talk about, historical or present. And I love the fact you ended it with, embracing AI in this new world. We'll have to have you back on in the future. And I look forward to sharing a glass of wine with you soon.
Yeah.
I'm sure. So,
and thank you for your service to this industry. You've been,
agreed.
Nearly 50 years of support, thought leadership in this industry. And so thank you for doing
Keith,
that for
James,
all of us.
I'm honored to be with you both. And you know what? I look forward, not to my next 47 years. I love what we do here, what you do, James, what you do, Keith. And I believe that we both represent firms that are relevant today and going to be even more relevant in the months and years to come. I look forward to seeing you in September, if not sooner, James.
You got it, my friend, for sure.
All right.
Thanks again.
Thanks, John.
Come on out. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, John.
It's our job to say out loud what everybody's only thinking to themselves. It's your job to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode.